Hello everyone and welcome into Coach Craig Sports. This is the UFL DFS video for week number 8. If you're joining me for the very first time, first of all, welcome in. Second of all, this is how this week's video will be structured. We're going through all the teams, talking about the players that I do find relevant for the slate overall, talking about whether I would consider them a GPP option, a cash game option, or a GPP paydown option. Obviously, a lot of news going out there this week. We're getting some guys returning from IR that may or may not play. We're getting some new injury news, and we are getting some guys that have been cut and signed this week as well. So a lot of moving parts overall. This sheet will be updated throughout the week over on my Patreon page, so definitely feel free to check it out if you're over there. If you're not, it's a very small monthly donation over there where you get access to this sheet, you get access to the UFL DFS stats, snap counts, everything else like that, as well as some MLB DFS notes if that's something you're into as well. But without further ado, we're going to start off with the Birmingham Stallions. So Alex McGough was activated off IR, so we'll see who starts at quarterback this week for them overall, whether it's him, whether it's Case Cookis. We saw Jamar Smith, kind of in that second half of last week's game, I believe it was, that looked pretty good. So a lot of different options out there. Andrew Peasley missed last week. He was limited in practice on Tuesday, was full on Wednesday due to his knee injury, so he should be around as well. So 4 quarterbacks out there for this team at this point in time. Obviously, we'll see who is ultimately ends up being the starter. I think the only guy that pretty much doesn't have a chance of being the starter this week would be Andrew Peasley. Then at running back, we got CJ Marable, Ricky Pearson Jr. Both haven't done too much this season, but a little bit better as of late. So if you want to roll them out in GPPs, you can definitely take a shot there as well. In terms of the wide receivers, mainly just interested in Deion Kane as a GPP option at $8,400. If you really want to play like Davion Davis or Marlon Williams, you can definitely do that as well. Jalen Camp, seen a good amount of snaps, kind of a paydown option if you really wanted to go that direction. They did cut Austin Watkins this week, and Amari Rodgers did miss practice on Tuesday and Wednesday due to a hamstring injury. Jay Sternberger, he's that guy that's kind of that second half bandit. So $4,600 viable paydown option coming off a pretty strong week. You can definitely go there if that's something you want to do. And then in terms of their defense, kind of a GPP option going against the St. Louis Battlehawks. The Battlehawks do have a decent run game. If they're able to stop that, then it should be a pretty advantageous spot. And so far this season, Max Duggan has showed the ability to turn the ball over. So there could be some decent upside there at a relatively cheap price tag. Then we move over to the Houston Roughnecks. I am not 100% sure that it's Jalen McClendon at quarterback this week, but if he's out there, if he's starting there, you want to roll him out as a GPP option. Does definitely make some sense. I would expect it to be him once again, though. And then in terms of the running back room, Kirk Merritt did not practice on Tuesday, was limited on Wednesday due to that hamstring injury. Kind of expect him to miss once again this week. And in that case, I do like Zakondre White. $8,200 as a viable GPP option. In terms of the wide receivers, mainly just looking at Justin Hall this week at $9,200 a GPP option. If you want to mix and match some other guys in there as well. Lawrence Keeves would be my second favorite at $3,700. It's kind of a paydown option just in general. And then Jaquarius Spivey, who missed last week, did practice in full on Tuesday and Wednesday due to his hamstring injury, so would expect him back for week number 8. In terms of the Roughnecks defense, $3,600 going against the Michigan Panthers. Not really a matchup that I want to get to this week overall. Then we move down to the Memphis Showboats. Dresser Wynn was limited in practice on Tuesday and Wednesday due to his knee injury. Is technically listed as probable. We just want to see that depth chart to make sure that he is starting once again. If he's starting, he's a viable GPP option. Probably not the most upside at the quarterback position, but, definitely a guy that you want to mix and match in some lineups, if you're playing multiple lineups at the same time as well. And then at the running back position, we got news that Wes Hillis is going to be out this week due to a calf injury. So Deneric Prince will be the main guy once again. So GPP option there at $6,300. If you really want to throw a dart throw on Jalen Jackson, you could do it, but it's not something I'm personally doing this week overall. And then in terms of the wide receivers, we have Jonathan Adams at the top, $9,500. He's a viable GPP option once again. David Davis had 5 targets in his return, but had 0 catches. If he can straighten that out in week number 2, could be an interesting option, probably a little bit lower ownership because of the goose egg. And then Kwame Lassiter, limited practice on Monday, full on Tuesday and Wednesday, so it looks like he will be back for this game, probably that third option at wide receiver. We'll see if he's listed as a starter or not. Obviously, without him playing last week, we saw a good amount of snaps for Eli Stove and Kyle Loxley, so not really to get into too much else here. If you want to play Kwame Lassiter, you could definitely do that. And then they did sign Thomas Burke as kind of a third tight end this week as well. And then for that Memphis Showboats defense, $4,000 viable GPP option going against the San Antonio Brahmas, who have had their struggles quite a bit on offense so far this season. Then we move down to the Michigan Panthers. We got Bryce Perkins at quarterback at $10,800. I do have him listed as a cash game option, although he was limited in practice on Tuesday and Wednesday due to an ankle injury, which could be something that could affect his mobility just in general. So maybe we get to a little bit more Jordan Ta'amu in our cash games than Bryce Perkins this week, but definitely do like the upside of Bryce Perkins once again. In terms of the running back position, Matthew Colburn was activated off IR this week, and then they did ultimately end up cutting Jaden Sheridan. Obviously, the presence of Nate McCreary, Toa has definitely made him expendable. Plus, getting Matthew Colburn back could be an interesting backfield. Personally, I think Nate McCreary and Toa both going to be viable GPP options once again this week. Obviously, we'll see what the status of Matthew Colburn is ultimately when we do get that depth chart coming out. And then in terms of wide receivers, mainly just getting to the top two guys once again with Silas Mariner at $8,100 and Malik Turner at $8,600. Both are viable GPP options. You know, if you really want to take a shot on somebody else, you could definitely do it, but it's not something I'm personally doing at this point in time. Then we move down that Panthers defense, $4,300 going against Houston Roughnecks. I do like the upside that they do have, although they will be without their key linebacker in Frank Ginda, but definitely do like that upside at $4,300. Moving down to the Arlington Renegades, Luis Perez, I believe, coming off a pretty decent week, so $9,200. Like the upside of him just in general. Obviously, the one downside with him is he's not a mobile quarterback, but pretty banged up in that running back department at this point in time. Obviously, Kalen Ballage went on IR last week. Davion Smith missed practice on Wednesday due to a knee injury. They did sign Tony Jones last week, but he was inactive. So mainly it was Day Hunter for the most part last week. He's up to $7,200. He was not super efficient in that game, so if you want to take a shot on him, you can definitely do that. You know, if we get Davion Smith ruled out and it's Day Hunter, Tony Jones Jr., if you really want to go with a pay down option of Tony Jones Jr., you can definitely do that at the same time as well. In terms of the wide receivers, I'm going to mainly be looking at Tyler Vaughns, Isaiah Winstead, and Sal Cannell. Vaughns coming off the pretty strong week. Cannell has been pretty solid all season. But, you know, if you want to take some shots on Deontay Burnett, Javonte Payton, you can definitely do that at the same time as well. Then we move down to that Arlington Renegades defense. They're going against the DC Defenders, $3,700. Just not quite an attractive matchup that I want to get to this week overall. And then we move down to that DC Defenders team. We got Jordan Ta'amu at quarterback, $11,000. This DC offense really throwing the ball quite a bit this year. So Jordan Ta'amu, cash game play at $11,000. He is the most expensive quarterback on the slate just in general. In terms of the running back room, we kind of saw Deion Jackson overtake Abram Smith last week. He played a lot more snaps than him. So if you really want to go out there, play Deion Jackson, you can definitely do that at $7,800. And then in terms of the wide receivers, mainly just looking at the same three that we've been looking at for quite a while now. Chris Rowland, Braylon Sanders, and Cornell Powell. All viable GPP options. Obviously, it was a down week for Chris Rowland last week, but definitely do like the upside of all three of these players. And then one other note for their wide receiver room, they ended up cutting Josh Matthews this week, and then they signed Seth Williams, who is expected to be inactive for this game. And then Ben Brenishin, the backup tight end, limited in practice on Wednesday due to a head injury. We'll see whether or not he is ultimately able to go this week, but he's not a guy that we would want to be playing for DFS purposes anyways. And then for that DC Defenders defense, $4,200. Technically, I don't have them as a play, but if you want to roll them out as a GPP option against the Arlington Renegades, if they are able to get some pressure on Luis Perez, could be a good game for them overall. Then we move down to San Antonio Brahmas. It is expected that Kevin Hogan will be the starter once again this week, so $9,000 GPP option if you want to go that direction. Anthony McFarland is out once again due to a shoulder injury, so we're going to be looking at Jayshon Corbin as a viable GPP option at $7,300, maybe even a cash game option at this point in time. Aiden Robbins behind him, only $4,000. And then they did pick up Jaden Sheridan as kind of like another running back to have on the roster, who was obviously away by the Michigan Panthers earlier in this week, so wouldn't expect too much from him this week, but maybe in the future. And then in terms of that wide receiver room, we have Matthew Sexton and Greg Ward both out once again. It does look like Jacob Harris will be back, so we'll kind of have to see how this room all shakes out. But Kirkland looked pretty good last week, so we consider him a viable GPP option. You know, if you want to go out there, play some Jacob Harris at $5,000. If he's ultimately starting, it could be a very interesting spot for him just in general. And then, you know, if you want to go like Justin Smith, Marquez Stevenson, you can take some shots there at the same time as well. Maybe even D. Anderson in week 2 with the team. Although last week we did see both tight ends get very involved. I believe both of them scored a touchdown, so viable pay down options if you want to go that direction, although that wide receiver room's a little bit healthier than it has been in recent weeks. And then we move down to that Brahmas defense, $4,000. I have them listed as a viable GPP option, kind of with a question mark. Not a team that I'm going after a ton, but going against the Showboats, there could be some opportunities to be had there, especially if they can stop the run and get after Dresser Wynn just in general. And then last but not least, we move down to the St. Louis Battlehawks. Max Dugan, the expected starter at quarterback, once again, $9,500. He's a GPP option if you really want to go out there and play him. Personally, I've not been doing that quite a bit myself. He does have that rushing upside, which does help him out a little bit at the same time as well. Then we have Jacob Sailors at running back, $10,000, viable GPP option there. In terms of wide receivers, if there's somebody you really like, you can play them, but This group has not been too inspiring in recent weeks. Hakeem Butler had the big game back, scored the touchdown the next week, wasn't doing too much last week. So kind of mix and match at that wide receiver position, and they're not throwing the ball a ton. So that kind of hurts the group as a whole just in general. And then for that Battlehawks defense, $4,100 would consider them a viable GPP option going against the Birmingham Stallions, especially if they can get pressure on whatever quarterback ultimately does end up starting for Birmingham this week. But with that being said, that's a quick little rundown on my UFL DFS sheet for week number 8. As always, if you have any questions related to UFL DFS, be sure to drop them down in the comments section below, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Once again, I will be posting all the inactives as they do come out down in that comment section as well. If there's any other major news, I'll leave it there. But other than that, the sheet will be updated over on my Patreon page, so definitely feel free to check it out over there at the same time as well. Once again, very small monthly donation for that. But with that being said, if you were brand new to my channel, checking out for the very first time, or have yet to subscribe, please consider doing so. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS. Right now, we have MLB DFS in terms of the core pick videos, typically Monday through Friday. I know this week's a little wonky. We missed Monday. We'll be missing next Monday as well. There won't be a video coming out for Thursday just because it is a super weird slate for MLB just in general, but I will be posting out my notes for that over on the Patreon page as well, and those ones will be up 100% for free. And then I do have my UFL DFS video coming out once a week, typically on Wednesdays. Sometimes it floats over to Thursday, just kind of depends on the week. And then last but not least, if you're interested in sports betting, if you're interested in prop betting whatsoever, be sure to check out the links and promo codes down in the description below for BetUS, Prize Picks, and Parlay Play. If you are a brand new user to any one of those 3 sites, when you sign up, make your initial deposit, you will get a first match deposit bonus. For Prize Picks and Parlay Play, it's 100% match up to $100. And then for BetUS, it's 125% match up to $2,000. So some pretty great opportunities we had out there. If you have any other additional questions related to that whatsoever, feel free to reach out to me, whether it's down in the comment section of this video or on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport, and be more than happy to help you with that journey as well. But with that being said, that's all that I truly have for this week's video. Definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. Definitely means a lot to me. I hope that each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in UFL DFS for week number 8.